All right, this is Brain Physiology and Function, Section D lecture. Our prioritized standards are 3C. Objectively, we're going to analyze the lobes of the cerebrum and the various cortexes at play. Now, each hemisphere of the cerebrum is made up of the cerebral cortex that actually carries on the major portion of higher mental processing. So this includes things like thinking and perceiving, which is actually going to have 4 regions or lobes of the brain performing different tasks. Now, the frontal lobe, like the name suggests, in the front, are the cortical regions at the front of the brain that are especially involved in movement and thinking. They perform higher mental, or necessary in performing higher mental functions such as planning, deciding, and perceiving. Personality and temperament have important components here, like Phineas Gage, which we mentioned on a previous video, who suffered a injury to his brain that actually went through his frontal lobe that actually impacted his personality. People that knew him before and after said he had a completely different personality after the injury than he had before the injury. Now, this also includes the motor cortex, which controls voluntary movement, with the motor cortex on the side of the brain actually controlling muscles on the opposite side of the brain. So the motor cortex, that's going to be a part of your left side, actually controls your right-hand side. And those on your right-hand side are going to control the left-hand side. This is located again at the front of the central fissure, which is a narrow vertical strip. Their parietal lobes, these are the cortical areas lying toward the back and top of the brain. So that would kind of be like here, that are involved in touch sensations and in perceiving spatial relationship, which again is relationships of objects that are in space. This includes the somatosensory cortex, that is the primary processing area for the sensations of touch, temperature, brain, and pressure from all over the body. Now, this relates the information that's received to a mental map of the body that help you locate the source of a sensation. So like a special parietal strip, this is going to be mirroring the adjacent strip of the motor cortex. So they are involved with each other. So the sensory and the motor are involved. That's why they're pretty much next to each other in the brain. This helps keep track of the position of body parts. So this kind of helps prevent you from biting off your own tongue when you eat. Also stepping on your own toes. When your leg goes to sleep or goes numb, like when you lay on it wrong, your body position actually has temporarily disabled the nerve cells carrying sensory information to body maps in the parietal lobe. So basically, when it falls asleep, your brain kind of freaks out because it's not sure where your body parts are. Now, this also helps us locate in 3-dimensional space the positions of external objects detected by our senses. It helps us locate the source of speech sounds. So like when somebody calls your name, you usually can figure out where it's coming from because of this. All right, the occipital lobe, or lobes, are the cortical regions at the back of the brain that houses the visual cortex, which is the visual processing area of the brain that turns stimulation relayed from the eyes into vision. So you ever hear about teachers having eyes in the back of their head? Well, that's actually where that part of the brain is located, in the back, so magic. Now, the visual input is actually sent to separate cortical areas for processing color, movement, shape, shading, recognition of human faces, and perception of the human body. The occipital lobes must rely on the adjacent parietal lobes to locate objects in space, so they work together. Now, the temporal lobes, these are the cortical areas that produce sounds, including speech. that are believed to be involved in storing long-term memories, as the temporal lobes are located just above the hippocampus that are involved in forming memories. So they are around memories, that has to do with it, and also they're the ones that are over your ears. So a lot of times memories are associated with sounds. Since again they are right in the same area, that does make sense. Now this houses the auditory cortex that helps make sense of sounds, as the temporal lobes are located near your ears again. Also, this is involved in the sense of smell and also vision. Now, every mental and behavioral process involves the coordination and cooperation of many brain networks, which is referred to as the association cortex, which are cortical regions throughout the brain, not any one spot, but throughout, that combine information from various other parts of the brain. Now, the human brain has more cortical areas that are committed to making associations than any other types of species. Now, when talking about the two cerebral hemispheres, there appears to be a cerebral dominance, which is the tendency of each brain hemisphere to exert control over different functions. Now, the left hemisphere's processing style is going to be more analytical and sequential, while the right hemisphere's processing style interprets experience more holistically and spatially. Now, the left hemisphere is going to be associated with regulation of things like positive emotions, control of muscles used in speech, control of sequence of movements, spontaneous speaking and writing, memory for words and numbers, and understanding speech and writing. While the right hemisphere is going to be associated with regulation of negative emotions, responses to simple commands, memory for shapes and music, interpreting spatial relationships and visual images, and also recognition of faces, as a few for instances. Now, research by neurologists have helped confirm these associations through studies of patients with specific types of brain injuries. Now, left hemisphere brain damage is going to be associated with paralysis of the right side of the body, speech and language deficits, behavioral style that is slower and more cautious, and memory deficits in language. As where if you have right hemisphere brain damage, this is going to be associated with paralysis of the left side of the body, spatial perception deficits, a behavioral style that becomes more quick and aggressive, and memory deficits in performance, as a few for instances. While some processes are more under the control of one hemisphere than another, both hemispheres actually work together to produce our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Enabling cooperation between the hemispheres is the corpus callosum, which is a bundle of nerve fibers responsible for transferring information between the two hemispheres of the brain. It's kind of a little nerve that holds together both sides. It's going to look more like that. Now, pseudoscience has attempted to proclaim that people can be classified as either right-brained or left-brained in an effort to make money by selling books, videos, or other types of making money. But the scientific evidence does not actually support the idea that any such distinction actually does in fact exist. Although they have done a couple experiments where they have actually severed this nerve to see what happens. Not a lot of dramatic differences, although if one eye is closed, then it can do some really interesting things. But your body can actually operate without this nerve, but mild effects when they're not. All right, that concludes Brain Physiology and Function Section D lecture. Our prioritized centers again were 3C, and objectively now can analyze the lobes of the cerebrum and the various cortexes that are at play.